Hello and welcome to Piano Shack with me, Woody. I recently bought one of these to try and figure out for myself why this has been such a success for Arturia. So, in today's video, I'd like to present for you my thoughts on the top 10 reasons why this has been so popular and also point out a few of the things that I dislike about it. The first thing I noticed when getting this out of the box is that it has a very reassuring heft to it. One of the reasons for that, it's quite heavy, is that the base is actually made of metal, which is really unusual on any MIDI keyboard controller. So that's very nice. The top panel, although I don't think it's metal, I'm not really sure because it does feel really solid as well with no flex whatsoever. The knobs feel quite nice as well, with no slop or wobble to them, so that's great. And all the buttons feel really nice as well. We'll talk more about the feel of the keys in a later section. The next thing that struck me is the size. It's extraordinarily compact, much smaller than I was expecting. And this is really useful if you want to, like I often do, is put it on your desk, because it doesn't take up a lot of space. You still have space on your desk for your keyboard and your mouse. I also appreciate that it's very low. It's not a tall keyboard, so you can even access the keyboard behind it without being too ergonomically uncomfortable. I do have larger MIDI keyboards as well, and they sure have their advantages in the playability. But the nice thing about something in this size is that you can always leave it on your desk and connect it up, so you can fire up a soft synth, your DAW, and start playing right away. I also appreciate that there's very little wasted space to the left, the right, and the depth of the keyboard is pretty much as minimum as it possibly can be. So the design of this is really nice and compact. I'd like to talk about the keyboard range. This particular model, the KeyStep 37, has 37 keys, which is 3 octaves. One there. The Pro has the same range, the KeyStep Pro, and the original model had about half an octave less, I think. But this is still quite nice because it does allow you to play with 2 hands. I think 3 octaves is pretty much the limit for playing with 2 hands. So I can work out songs and play the bass lines and the chords at the same time. It does tend to force you to play a little bit in the key of C. I was doing a song in B flat and you don't have the lower B flat, which is a bit... So you have to jump up to the B flat. So it does encourage you to play a bit more in the key of C than you normally would, but otherwise it's fine for two-handed stuff. And of course, with the mini keys, it allows it to be really compact. So it's a bit of a compromise there. If they'd have had full-size keys, it would have been a lot larger, and therefore not so suitable for having always on your desk. Yes, they are mini keys. I know a lot of people hate those, but if they had been full-size keys, it would have taken up a lot more space and been less practical. It is possible to play fairly well using these mini keys, but nothing too advanced, and you'll be okay. The keys are velocity sensitive, although with the default touch they tend to trigger very high in the velocity range, so you'll get quite high velocity numbers. It's hard to play softly is what I'm trying to say. I think there is a configuration for that if you download and install the editor software for this device. Perhaps it's possible to choose different velocity curves. It also has aftertouch. Although there isn't a huge amount of control, it seems to be a little bit either on or off. And I always feel uncomfortably pressing or using aftertouch on these small mini plastic keyboard controllers, the plastic keys, because they do feel quite fragile and you have to use a lot of pressure to activate the feature. But it's there if you want it, which is pretty good at this price range. For the guys and girls that want to use this to control eurorack gear, you'll be happy to see, and another reason for its popularity, I think, is there's a full set of CV outputs and also the sync outputs. You can connect this to euroracks or analog synths with these type of connectors. Analog connectors, very cool and unusual to see on a controller keyboard. Also quite unusual on a USB MIDI controller keyboard at this price is the round old school 5-pin Midi DIN port. For the MIDI out, if you want to connect this, for example, to an external hardware synthesizer and control it. Unusually, we have a MIDI in as well. I'm not sure why you might want a MIDI in on a keyboard that doesn't have its own sounds, but I'm sure there is a use case for that. Please do let me know in the comments, but super generous that Arturia included both of those. Quite a few MIDI controllers have arpeggios built in these days. This one has one as well, but what I like about it is the hands-on control. So if we start playing an arpeggiator here, start it playing, we can hold down to latch it. I have immediate control over the tempo on the dedicated knob, the time interval, and here the arpeggiator pattern. I like this one on the top. If I want to adjust the swing or the gate time, that's really easy to do as well by using the shift functions and the keys. We get it going again. Shorter gate time, or introduce some swing. Really nice to have all those controls available hands-on without needing to do any menu diving. By toggling this switch from the ARP up to the sequencer mode, I can program in a step sequencer, either using monophonic single notes or even chords, which is incredibly cool. This is going to come in really useful. So let's try and program a pattern, clear anything that we might currently have, go into record mode. This will do rests, otherwise I just play the notes on the keys. So let's have something like this. I think that's in. That's 16 steps. We can have up to 64. So let's play this. I think we've got some swing going on there, which I will switch off. There we go. And again, we can adjust the gate and the swing using the shift buttons here. Very nice. And that will transpose if we go into the transpose mode. Very cool. I can also program in chord sequences, so let's try that now. That's 4 chords programmed in. Let's play that. Going too fast, but we can slow down the time division. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how I'll use that, but I know that I'll find usages when I'm doing my synth demonstrations. Another really fun feature that I appreciate immensely is that you can perform and play over the top of your recorded sequences, like this. Make sure first you're in the keyboard mode and not the transpose mode. Yeah, you've got to make sure that you don't interfere with the MIDI pattern that's being played. Another really cool thing though is that you can assign the keyboard to play on a different MIDI channel than the sequencer that's playing. So you could have 2 different sounds going at the same time. improvise over the top. Fantastically cool, I think, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Another really nice feature that we have here that you do see on other MIDI keyboard controllers, but this one seems to be implemented really nice, is a chord mode. So normally you just get one note as you strike a key, but here I can define my own user chords or octaves, fifths, sus chords, minor, major, and so on. And this knob will adjust the number of notes that are being played. The octave range. Let's go for that one. This knob here will randomize it slightly depending on the velocity, how hard you hit the notes. This one is really nice. I can strum up and down or up. You can even have very slow strums that can be synchronized with your MIDI clock to create really interesting pseudo ARP patterns. A lot of potential here also for creativity and fun. Another important aspect for me that I'm sure you've realized as I've been demonstrating this keyboard is that there are no menus. There is a single little LED display here that just shows you the value of any knob or adjustment or parameter that you're changing, but otherwise there is no LCD display to have to worry about. Everything is hands-on here. Admittedly, there are quite a few shift functions that you need to learn, but once you've got those under your fingers, everything is really hands-on, and that's something that I personally really appreciate. Well done, Arturia, on a fabulously designed user interface. Also included in the box is this strange looking device. This is actually a ground loop isolator for USB. If you've tried to use USB MIDI to sequence a synthesizer and then captured the audio through a different USB audio interface, you might have experienced buzzing, interference, and really horrible noises and artifacts that you don't want. Well, this little device will prevent that from happening. And these by themselves are usually pretty expensive devices, so it's awesome that Arturia included one of these in the box. If you were wondering what it is, well, now you know. Okay, let's talk about a few of the things that I dislike about this product. The first is the pitch strips. There's no physical mod wheel here, it's just a touch sensitive strip. I don't have an issue with that per se, and for the pitch it works really nice for adding vibratos. But for the mod wheel I don't like it so much. The problem is they're very, very sensitive. If you just brush over it, you can apply a lot of modulation, which ruins the sound, and that can easily happen during a performance. If you're playing left-hand bass, your fingers hang over here and you can accidentally brush into it, or when you're operating the buttons you can accidentally touch it and you have no idea if you've done so because there's no visual indication here. You'll just get a nasty surprise when you play the sound. We talked about the very cool feature where you can perform over the top of your sequenced patterns, either on the same MIDI channel or on a different MIDI channel. That's a lot of fun. I would love to see that feature also available in the arpeggiator mode. I'd like to be able to play an arpeggio and then improvise over the top of that. But for some strange reason, not possible to do in ARP mode. You'd think if they can do it for a sequencer, you could do it for an ARP. Hopefully that's something we can see in a firmware update, because that's a limitation that I ran into just after about 10 minutes of playing around with the keyboard. A little bit disappointing. So perhaps I've been spoiled a little bit by my other MIDI controllers that have 8 knobs, and perhaps a set of faders as well. This only has 4 knobs. You can use a shift function and step through different banks of parameters. I can see 4 different banks, so there are 16 knobs. But the ones that are immediately available to you without using any special shift functions are just 4, which is a little bit limited. Another reason, of course, these have been so popular is the price. They are super affordable and good value for money. The original KeyStep comes in at about $150. This particular model, the 37, is $200. But a drawback I'd like to mention is the price of the Pro model. I would love to have gone for the Pro, which has extra sequencer lanes and a few other features, although basically in the same form factor. But that one is pretty much approaching $500, so a huge step up in price. And for me, that doesn't seem to represent such good value for money, so I went for this mid-range model. But it's a shame, I think, that the Pro is so expensive. Actually, not a big deal for me, but it doesn't have a USB-C connection. It's using the old, is it called the USB-A sort of printer style? At least that's a fairly robust connection size. A lot stronger than, for example, micro USB. But everything these days seems to be going towards USB-C. So a little bit of a shame that this one is lagging behind the trends there. Another real bummer, and something that they've addressed in the Pro version, but I don't want to pay an extra $300 for that, is that this one doesn't have a built-in metronome, which would be really useful when using the pattern sequencer. You can actually, on this, record sequences in real time. You don't have to enter them in step by step. But that's pretty much impossible to do without a metronome. You just have to look at the flashing light on the button, which is pretty unhelpful. So yeah, that's a real drawback. There are some hacks. I've heard of people connecting headphones, like a cheap pair of headphones, to the sync output, which is just an analog signal. And then you do hear some kind of click coming through your headphones or earbuds. So that's something I'll have to experiment with. But yeah, that's a pretty major drawback on this unit. Finally then, I do have a couple of issues with the keys here. As I said, it's quite hard using the default settings to play expressively because the velocities transmitted are a little bit too high. It's very hard to play softly on this one. Another thing that did concern me slightly is that the keys, it's only very slight, and I'm not sure if you can even see it on the camera, but the height of the keys is rather uneven. The C here, for example, is much lower than the B. Just that E is much higher than those ones. You just see clusters of notes that are higher than the others. It doesn't really affect anything when you're playing. It doesn't have any impact on your performances, but it just looks a bit cheap, I think, and detracts from the overall feeling of quality that I get with this keyboard. Yeah, purely cosmetic, I suppose, but you can certainly feel it when you brush your fingers across the keys. So I thought this was going to be a quick video to make and for you to watch, but it seems like I've been talking for ages, so thank you if you made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful and informative. I'll see you again next time. Cheerio.